Yeah.
even you, I know you studied quite a lot also about atheism and dictatorships and this on. And how do you think, is this also your experience if, for example, if in dictatorships mostly they can only be dictators because they lie to people, and they, if once they start lying, then they use force to keep up their power mostly, no? Do you think
Yeah, I mean,
even we are democratic could be that also it be getting more like in some areas, but of course not other areas, but in this kind of area, like dictating people's lifestyle? Do you think this could be a consequence? Even we
yeah,
call ourselves democratic, but in some areas we are getting quite dictatorship.
yeah, maybe before we talk about that, Johan, I think it's really important that we talk about the damage.
Hmm.
Because if you don't understand the damage and that's being forced upon us, then it becomes very complicated. Then if you understand that damage, then you start to understand that we're being forced to accept damage in our societies, and we're being, and because no one can talk about that damage without being told they are nasty people or transphobic or something, then you don't see the totalitarian nature of this. You don't see the, you know, and it's really important to understand why the damage is created. Yeah. So if I can speak about that for a while.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So within everything we, you know, when I talk about this three blessings framework, one of the first things about the area of flow and development and growth is the concept of mind and body unity. It's a concept that through interaction between what I call the mind and the body, it generates energy. This energy then gives rise to civil society, and it's the same within a family. The energy created by a man and woman together creates a child, and that creates a lot of our social institutions like schools, universities, and all kinds of things. And of course, our natural relationship with the natural world also creates energy, and we build things with it, and we do things. Yeah. But the basic concept is that there's mind and body unity, which means that there has to be, because it's the only way to create energy, is some dynamism between two elements. Energy just doesn't come from itself. So there's an energy between our mind, so we think something, we do something, and then that, you know, comes out as doing something, like my garden.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's the basis of social, basis of everything we know to be good and true. It's the basis of social trust. For example, I make a promise to you, and I keep it. So in that interaction between my brain saying it and the action done, it builds social trust. And if I say it in my brain or just say it in words and I don't do it, you don't trust me. And it's the same with companies. You know, they say they do something and they do it. Yeah. A scientific theory, you know, it's a mind thing. You know, this is the way the world works. And then we apply it to practical life, and we build with it. You know, we use it, and when that scientific science theory is truthful, we can build with it, and we build beautiful things. If we have a doctor, for example, he says, "I'm a doctor." We go, "Well, okay, but show me, give me some proof. You know, show me your degree, or, you know." And we go, "Okay, now I can see." Yeah, we don't just accept people's words or mine. Yeah. If someone says it's a kilometer between here and there, then we measure it. I mean, it has to be measurable. And they say, "Okay, I agree with you." Or if you tell me you're a nice 55-year-old man, and I say, "Okay, I believe you," and I understand what that means, because I understand that means we've been around the sun, you know, 55 times since you were born, and we all agree that. And so there's a unity between a thought and actual reality. And based upon that, we build our world and we build social trust. So So the trouble is with transgenderism, the fundamental problem for human society is that when you make any laws based upon transgender theory, you have to neglect the body. You have to say the body of the person doesn't exist. You have to say that person thinks they're transgender, therefore they're transgender. We have to deny the reality of the physical world, the physical, and we just say, yes, that person says they're transgender. So therefore, the laws start to reflect that, and they start to say, we make laws for those who think they're women, and those who think that we make laws for those who think they are men. And that's it. And there's no body. There's no body to consider. But the trouble is with that, there's no energy. And if you come to the point of believing that, then you start to, whenever you make a policy based upon that theory, it means that that policy will create no energy. It will create decay, not positive outcomes. And once you put it into when you put transgender theory into any piece of social legislation, the number of people it hurts is far, far greater than the number of people it helps. And so social decay is an automatic response. It's like putting antimatter into the social system, into a healthy, reasonably healthy society, and saying, I'm going to put antimatter in there, and then expecting society to carry on happily. And it doesn't work. It just creates destruction because there's no energy created by it. And the art of always the artist of seeing the problems with this legislation is to see the damage. And when you see the extensive damage, you say, well, this is really what I want to create for my society in the name of building a more tolerant world. Yeah. So,
Stephen, one question. In this case, do you mean like this is like a kind of self-destructive system? Actually, if you start really putting it in our society, this will be the consequence that actually like an program is coming to start, that society will be destroyed finally.
Good. Yeah, it will. The end consequence will be a substantial weakening of the ability of other people to build constructive lives. It will be a substantial harm. It's like we've already got this happening with lots of, several groups of children who are coming out of the data having worse lives than their parents, worse life expectancies, worse life, unable to marry, unable to save, etc., etc. But this is just creates even more groups of people who in the next generation will have more difficult lives. We're not talking about transgender people, we're talking about just people who are caught in the negative effects of the transgender legislation. And so, there's two main types of, so does that answer your question? Yeah?
Yeah,
So
of course, yes.
So as transgender comes in, automatically we start to see children pretending, more and more children saying we're transgender, more and more operated on, more of them having tragic lives. That's one group of children, for example. Yeah, but there's lots of other people who are negatively affected. And transgender legislation, there's kind of two main types. There's a type which harms people. It denies the reality of the biological sex of people in places where the biological sex of people is the most important thing. For example, public spaces where women want to be safe, for example.
Oh, I see, like toilets or
toilets,
bathrooms.
showers, whatever. Prisons, whatever. So these laws deny the reality of the physical body in places where the physical body is really the primary problem that cause for concern. Yeah, and the other kind of legislation is to do with legislation which creates harm for everybody. Okay, so you can break it down in two different forms, and you can look at the form that hurts men and women who in public spaces especially. So for example, so we have this, of course, you said bathrooms, toilets, showers, public showers. Women, you know, they are denied. You know, women have a natural right to privacy in vulnerable spaces. Privacy from men. They have a natural right to that. And it's one of the primary roles of government is to ensure that they're safe in those vulnerable spaces. That's one of the primary roles of the state. So to allow men who are still very attracted to women, who say they are women, to enter these spaces is very vulnerable for women. And so we see in the, you know, there's not much research done it, but we see in public toilets, communal public toilets in England, there's like a 10 times the rate of sexual harassment or abuse of women. And nobody seems to care about these women who are harassed because of these men, you know. And then you've got sports centers and jails now. In jails in England, although transgenders only really have, you know, very small percentage of the population, now 1.5% of male prisoners identify as transgender, so they can go to women prisons, you know. And it's ridiculous because there's nowhere near that number. Not 1 in every 100 people or 60 people you meet is transgendered. Yeah, so but they do it just to go to the women's prisons. Yeah, so they abuse the system. Yeah, women's shelters, they come under attack. They might lose their funding because if they don't allow men in, and these women are escaping the abuse of women, and now they say you have to let in men who might abuse you. Yeah. And you'll lose your funding if you don't allow this. Yeah, hospital wards, women don't have privacy. Lesbian groups, many of them close down when transgender men enter because the men say, I'm a woman, but I have a penis and I'm attracted to women, so I'm a lesbian. And young transgender, young lesbians are told basically you have to sleep with this woman. Or you're transphobic, yeah, and you're a nasty person. So
it's really crazy.
It's crazy, you know.
It's crazy.
It just goes. The world goes crazy. I mean,
yeah.
you go to the doctors, and they ask for a woman-only doctor, and they find a bearded male looking up their vagina when they ask for a woman, and their rights are violated. Yeah, and it's the same for males. You know, males too can be deeply embarrassed about a woman in their shower room. Yeah, they might say, well, is she a nymphomaniac? Is she trying to seduce me? Is she psychologically harmed? What is she doing here? You know, and most males feel embarrassed, you might say, to have that in there. But they're not protected either, yeah? And of course, one of the big ones is sports, yeah? So in many sports now, men are participating in women's sports, or men born with the physical body of a male. And the women are losing, and they're losing their chances of professional development. And you know, if China turned up at the next Olympic Games with 700, 800 transgender males or women, transgender women, you know, males who say they're women, and said, well, we have a large country, and we have you know, a large number of transgenders. And we're going to, all these men are going to participate in women's sports, and they walk off with all the golds, you know. It's just unbelievable that we would allow this, yeah. But this is where we're going. Yeah?
Do you think this happened already, or you're just predicting?
Well, it's already had in minor sports, yeah.
Really?
And in certain things, but as this theory deepens, more and more women will say, well, what's the point? Why should I bother to try when this is like cheating, or this is like, you know, and it's a problematic. So that's the kind of stuff. But so women will give up on sports, maybe, you know, women will get harmed. All kinds of things will happen and get worse for them. So that's the fact. And then there's the legislation which harms all of us. Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So the first thing it does, because mind and body unity is the basis for like honesty, integrity, yeah? So a scientific theory has to be able to be put into practice, shown to work in practice, for it to be understood and honestly used. So if you break that bond, then you get dishonesty. Dishonesty enters the system. So anybody who's psychologically, you know, corrupt or hurt or damaged or narcissistic or morally corrupt can now abuse the laws and say, I'm a woman, for example, and go into a woman's bathroom, shower, whatever. And you can't do anything about it. You know, if a man is in the women's toilet and looking through the cracks in the doors and the mother sees him looking through the cracks at her daughter, you know, she's the one who'll get into trouble if she says anything. So she can't say anything, yeah? And if she says something, she's called transphobic, yeah? So you can't, trust is broken, social trust is broken. I mean, I can imagine some coaches, you know, we saw in the Soviet Union, the era of coaches, that they were quite willing to give the children drugs to enhance their performance, steroids and things like that, and they had no problem. And so I can imagine some coaches will say to boys, look, you're not going to make it with the boys, but if you take puberty blockers, if you take, you know, then you'll win. You can go to the Olympics, you know?
Yeah, gosh.
And I can imagine some sport coaches using that. You know, they're so determined to win. Doctors wanting to get wealthy, they just say, yes, okay, I'll transition you. I'll take the, you know, get the money for operations or, you know, in other words, it multiplies corruption within the social fabric. Because there's no, and people can't trust. You know, if your school is transitioning children and who don't know what, you know, 2 and 2 is, or, you know what I mean, then people and teachers are hiding things. They're teaching stuff to children about transgenderism, but they're not letting the parents know. And so the parents become suspicious, and they lose trust in. So they lose trust in the political leaders because they let men into, you know, places they shouldn't be, and the schools are hiding things, and people are making money from this with it, and people lose trust in their social leaders.
Finally,
so
also in the government, they lose trust in the government because the government is not really acting to protect.
As a protector, yeah. Yeah, you lose trust. When you know the research, you lose trust, yeah? And then the next thing is that science will suffer. We already see that in England. For example, trans women, men who say they're women, are being included in studies on like medicines for women.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, you know, but they've got male bodies, yeah? But so you can't disclude them because, you know, they say we're a woman, you have to include me, you know? We already see scientific journals refusing to publish certain articles which show the differences between men and women, like their brains or something like that, in the belief that this will be seen as transphobic, yeah? A letter was written to one of our major newspapers by a large number of scientists who say, we are being corrupted by trans theory.
Wow.
Yeah, so this included law, criminology, medicine, psychology, education, history, English, social work, computer science, cognitive science, anthropology, political science, economics, history of art, sociology. They say all our findings and our research and our thoughts are being corrupted. And we have to say things which we know are not true, because we don't want to be seen now as transphobic. And in other words, it's corrupting good people who are trying to do good work, and it's making them publish false stuff. And when you publish false stuff, we all will suffer the consequences eventually. We just don't see it yet.
Yeah, it's getting quite dramatic.
and then add to that, good people become morally corrupt. They're corrupted by it. Yeah. So, you know, if you're a doctor, imagine you're a doctor, and some trans woman comes to you, or trans man, and she says, I'm a man, right? But you know that she's a woman, yeah. But she says, I'm a man. And now what does he say? Now he can either say, well, you know, I'm going to treat you with women's drugs and possibly be called a transphobe. Or he can treat her with male drugs, which may be extremely damaging for her female body and cause her permanent damage. So he either, he gets corrupted either way. He either, you know, might lose his job because he said he's a transphobe, technically, or he might lose his job because he kills her. But what does he do? He's trapped in this lie, yeah? Parents and teachers, you know, they can't, the teachers have to teach this transgender stuff to children, and many of them know it does them harm. So good people are forced to do harm, and they're meant to wipe their moral conscience, you know, clean, but they know they're doing harm. So good people become to seem to be as bad people, yeah? And things like this. So, you know, so
do you mean this is getting to the all levels of society, that
yeah,
this
it goes
is
in,
very
it just
harmful?
infiltrates in all kinds of things, yeah. It
And,
just goes in, and wherever it goes, it causes damage because it's not based upon actual reality, yeah. It's not men who transition still have a body of a woman. That's it. And there's nothing they can do about it. And many of them struggle their whole life trying for perfection, trying makeup and all kinds of stuff and operation. And they still know they're fighting a battle against a body that is opposite sex, you know, male. And they know it.
They
and
cannot win, no? They cannot win this battle, basically, no?
They can't win it, no, because you're dealing with your DNA, yeah?
Yeah.
And so to understand, you know, you've got the feelings, they say, well, I want my feeling, I feel like I'm a woman, I want my feelings respected. And the government says, okay, we respect your feeling. But in doing so, then the government has to neglect the feelings of everybody else who is hurt because of this wanting to help this group. So, you know, what are the feelings of a parent who sees their child destroying their life? That's not just a little feeling of like social ostracization. This is your child, yeah? And every day of your life, you're going to have to deal with that child who's sterile or whatever, who made a mistake. This is pain. This is tears. This is expensive. This is your whole life consumed sometimes by this negative act, you know. Then what about the feelings of women who say, eventually will give up on professional sport? You know, they wanted to reach the top, they were giving their best, they felt they were good at it. And they were always you know, eventually, what about their feelings? And they, you know, maybe they turn to drink, some of them, or what's the point of it all, you know? Well, what about, you know, so in all people who get hurt by this, scientists who have to publish rubbish to get it published, you know, and they know their career is going to like, well, what's the point of that? What about their feeling? You know what I mean? It's like everybody else who gets hurt gets their feeling. And the government only cares about the feelings of this 0.05% of the population.
I understand.
And they have more rights then. They fundamentally say, our feelings are more important than your feelings. And everybody just has to bow down and say, yes, we accept that. We accept you have more rights to your feelings being affected than my feelings. And that's a tragedy, because basically the state is saying the highest state of being a human being is transgendered. They have more rights. They have to be honored and respected and have their feelings and taken care of, and nobody else has a right to their feelings being respected or taken care of. Only they, because the only concept is that they are a higher form of human. They are so precious to humankind. And you end up with a very warped society when you say that people who can't keep a job, who are very unhealthy, who can't be, are the highest form of mankind. You end up with a very, very warped society eventually, which degenerates into total chaos eventually. And if you don't see that, you might say, I have compassion for this group, but you have to see the negative consequences. So, when you focus on feelings without social consequence, what's the practical reality of social consequences? You know, what's the social consequence? There was that case, I don't know if you heard it, of this guy who was in Holland, I think, or something, and he said, although I'm 65, I feel like I'm 45. And if I can say I'm 45 on dating websites, then I'll get more women. So I want to apply to be 45. Can you imagine the consequence of us breaking that mind and body dynamic and the consequences for society, you know? So I'm a 14-year-old can say, well, I'm 60, I want my pension, please, you know. You know what I mean? And the consequences, the social consequences of breaking the mind-body construct when it comes to age would be terrifying.
Mm.
And it's the same with race or whatever. Some people who are born white say, I'm black. And you can, well, you know, okay, fine. But then you end up with a total confusion. And when anybody's trying to talk about anything, you don't know what it means anymore. Yeah. So you lose sense of meaning, and you can't just base things upon people's feeling. You have to have a substantial, you know, basis in actual reality, so that people know what you're talking about. And when you say a man is a man, a woman is a woman, you have to have a knowledge that this woman was born with a potential to reproduce, and she was born probably with eggs and reproduction, and that we treasure motherhood. Yeah, we go, this is incredible. You know, we got Mother Mary, and we got, you know, the honor of motherhood and this ability to create a child, which men don't have. Mm. And we acknowledge the honor of, and to take that away from women, to say humankind doesn't have a right to a word that expresses our understanding of what it means to be a person who can give birth to humankind. To have no longer a word to describe that would be, it's just inconceivable that politicians want to take that away. A few elected people want to take that right away from the vast majority of people who say, no, I want a sense of motherhood, which is connected to you know, to, or what am I meant to call parent one?